of Chemical Engineering, St. Joseph College of Engineering, Chennai. I especially want to welcome our guest as well as our alumni, Mr. Sid Datham, Energy Engineer and Associate Professor, University of Cincinnati, USA. Our HODs, Dr. R. Bhaskaran sir and Dr. N. Venkateswar, my colleagues and participants from various institutions. To start with, graduation became a standard to get a decent job. But now people are running towards a higher studies. At present day, the number of students who studied post-graduation is increased by almost 100% when we compare to the last decade. It is significantly ridiculous growth by any standards. Nowadays, graduation alone is not enough to sustain in this cutthroat competition. Specialization in one specific area can make you stand out from the crowd. Even in general psychological aspect, the recruiters may feel bored from the regular graduates. A specialization course will surely give an edge in the eyes of recruiters. Our guest will explain about the various possible ways to continue one's higher studies in reputed institutions. Now, I will hand over this session to our guest, Mr. Siddhartham.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Good evening to everyone that's on the call. Good morning if you're here in my time zone.
Hello? No.
Looks like somebody's on the phone. Okay, I should be good to go. Like I said, good evening to everyone that's on the call. I want to start off by thanking Vinod sir for reaching out to me to do this. Very excited to be on the call. Very excited to be on the call with the faculty members that I learned from, that taught me from several years ago. I haven't been on that call. I haven't been able to be in touch with people from St. Joseph's for a long time, but just very happy to be back. Even if it's virtual, it is what it is. It's a start. So I'm hoping that I could stay in touch with the chemical department moving forward. But the one thing that I want to get out of the way, I guess, I'm not sure if I can say get out of the way, but when Vinod sir and I were talking about what can we possibly present, we discussed a few things, some things technical, some things non-technical. And given the fact that you've already had a whole lot of technical presentations, some really good technical presentations, I figured that it would be good to share the experience that I've had as far as everything but technical goes. So this is not necessarily non-technical, but I guess you can say that in a way. And I also want to say that this is based on just my experience, my observation, and therefore it's one possible way to make the most of your higher studies, not the possible way, or this is not the only thing that you have to do. This is not a blueprint for everyone to follow. This is just something that worked for me, and I'm hoping that it'll work for everyone who hopes to get a degree after your bachelor's outside of India. And I also want to tie it to why wait until you finish your bachelor's. Why can't you do some of the things that that helped me during your bachelor's? So we'll get to that as we progress through the talk. So I guess I'll just get started. Okay, a little bit about me. As you already know, we're on an alumni workshop series. I am an alum of the chemical engineering department at St. Joseph's. I was on campus from 2008 to 2012. And right after I finished my bachelor's degree, I moved to Cincinnati to get a master's in chemical engineering. The hope eventually was to study, get a master's, work for a little bit, and then maybe get an MBA somewhere 6-7 years down the line. But one thing led to another, and I ended up getting an MBA also before I finished my time at the university. From the program, the chemical engineering program that I was a part of also involved a whole lot of research, and my research was based on metal organic frameworks based on membranes for highly selective gas separation. So in a nutshell, the research work was about creating membranes that would selectively separate carbon dioxide from a mixture of gases. There's a whole lot of moving parts within it, but that's the gist of it. After having graduated from UC, I now work at UC's power plant, to be specific, as an energy engineer. This involves a whole lot of understanding how the power plant produces energy for all the buildings on campus and all the hospitals in the area. And how do these buildings consume energy? So production and consumption. And the idea is to see how we can manage energy more efficiently. It's a lot of engineering. Clearly, it's an energy engineer job, which involves a whole lot of mechanical and electrical work also. So there's a lot of learning that I've been exposed to. As much as I know a decent amount, I guess I can say, about chemical engineering. There's a whole lot to learn as an energy engineer in terms of mechanical and electrical as well. In addition to that, I teach on and off in the College of Engineering here at the same university. I teach this course called Effectiveness in Technical Organizations, which is kind of like an organizational behavior course, let's say, which deals with, okay, so you've gotten your technical knowledge, you've gotten your technical degree, chemical engineering, electrical, mechanical, whatever that is. But how can we take it up a notch and gain some valuable skills that are going to complement our technical knowledge, so that helps us become more efficient and more productive engineers out in the field, out in the real world. So that's a course that I teach. Really enjoy it. Anything that pertains to management, I'm a huge proponent of it. But that's me in a nutshell. And I want to start off with how I got to where I am. My journey to my higher studies started back in second year of college. This was 2010, I think, 2020, yeah, somewhere around that time, when my neighbor told me that, it said, just like my grandson, you're going to go get a master's in chemical engineering from the University of Cincinnati. So that's what's going to happen. Deal with it. And at that point, I hadn't even heard of this place. I didn't even know that there was a place that was called Cincinnati that was popular, that they had a good university. They had a bunch of good programs, good degrees that I could look at. I just brushed it off in my second year, didn't really care. In my pre-final year, third year of college, is when I really got serious about higher studies. And one thing led to another. I was talking to a bunch of people, some of my seniors who were also looking at higher studies, but were further into the point of application. They were waiting for admissions. Some of them had already decided that they want to go. So I spoke to them, and turns out that Cincinnati did have a good university, and they did have a good chemical engineering program. Didn't make any of the predictions, I guess I can say, that my neighbor gave me back in the second year. But all I cared about was, hey, I want to go do higher studies. That's all I care about. And the pictures that you see are going to be like, dude, but why am I seeing these pictures? Back in college, during my third year, I'm like, okay, so I need to go to the US just so that I could get shoes that would probably fit my feet. And I know that sounds corny, but back in India, I have big feet. Let's just get it out of the way. And I couldn't find shoes that fit my feet. So I'm like, okay, this looks like I need to go to the US. The one good thing that will come out of getting my higher studies degree is I'll find shoes that fit my feet, because, hey, Shaquille O'Neal lives in the US, and if he can find shoes, I should be able to find shoes. And I used to listen to a whole lot of 50 Cent back in the day in my earphones, and used to jog, and I'm like, I wish I could totally do this a few years from now in the US. That would be great. I, at that point, didn't care about higher studies as such, but my goal was to buy proper shoes after I moved here and jog listening to 50 Cent in the club. And at that point, I wish I had paid more attention to the actual part of the program. What do you study? What are the courses, et cetera, et cetera. But then I guess at that point, I was just excited. Didn't think much of what I was getting into. I said, hey, it looks like it's a natural progression. A lot of people get their degrees, they don't work, they move to the US right away. So looks like that's what I'm going to do. But my takeaways are clear. I'm just going to get shoes and jog. Long story short, and as you already know, there's a whole lot of prep that goes into getting into several of the universities that's outside India. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into the ones that are in India also, but then there's GRE and TOEFL and application process and visa process and whatnot. One thing led to another, and I ended up accepting the offer that I had from the University of Cincinnati. Just like my neighbor told me 2 years ago, and at that point I didn't even have any clue of this place. And it happened, and I'm like, okay, looks like I'm here. So what's up? What do we do next? And I was going through a lot of forums, a lot of groups on Facebook, and they had a whole lot of memes about graduate student humor. And let me say this right now, I'm big about memes. I think memes are some of the best things ever, as long as they're clean and they're not hurtful. Memes are the best things ever. So you're going to see a lot of memes. So please be prepared for that. I thought, looking at these memes that says higher studies or grad school, they said that it was going to be fun. But then I looked at memes like these and I'm like, hey, what's going on? It'll be fun, they said, but clearly this guy's not having fun. He's in deep water. Looks like he's in a lot of trouble. Is my grad school experience going to be the same? Is higher studies going to be just like that? I wasn't sure. What I thought grad school was, it was a lot of coursework. You think that in undergrad we have a lot of subjects, but once we move here, there are way more subjects, way more complex, to the extent that we didn't even think of. Once you move here right after your undergrad, you are expected to be masters of what you studied. And I was far from it. So there was a lot of catching up, I guess you can say. There was a lot of planning in terms of what subjects do I sign up for, what courses do I take, when do I take them, do I take them this semester, or should I sign up for them next semester or the next year, things like that. So there was a lot of coursework. In my MBA, there were something that they call here flex terms, which are essentially duration-wise half, but the course load is the same. So if you have a friend at a different university who is getting the same degree, chances are that you will study anything and everything that they study, but you'll have to finish it in half the time. So the intensity is twice. The number of courses that you do in half the period is twice. So long story short, I thought grad school was going to be all about courses, all about subjects, and a lot of them. I thought grad school was about research. If you end up doing an engineering degree, chances are that it's probably going to be a thesis-based degree, which involves a whole lot of research. And mine was not any different. Mine was a whole lot of research, trying to find out how we can do things, mix and match, what pressure to reduce, what temperature to increase, et cetera, et cetera. So there was constant sense of, okay, let me figure this out. How about I think about it on my way to the university? How about I think about my research methodology on my way to buying milk, right? So it's something that always stayed in my mind, and I'm like, oh, I need to chill a little bit. But then it's just one of those things that research is always in the back of your mind, and it never goes away. And I thought grad school was going to be that. Student employment. As international students in the US, not sure about the laws for the different countries, but in the US, international students are not allowed to work off campus, only on campus employment when you're a student. And you can only work 20 hours, which in certain cases may not be enough, but that's just what the law is. That's just what the rule is. So we'll have to roll with it. On-campus employment can be anything from, you can see, being a teaching assistant, you grade papers, and sometimes there are papers like that many. And that gives you a very neat perspective on the kind of work that our teachers did back in the day in school and in college, of grading that many papers, making sure that the grades are submitted on time and things like that. A lot of people work in the libraries, a lot of people work in the cafeteria, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought grad school was about student employment and trying to find and balance time. then I thought, wait, okay, so I'm seeing all these memes, and this particular meme about reading is very reoccurring. Why do people rant about this so much? It turns out that there's a whole lot of literature review that you have to do as graduate students, and it's just a never-ending pile of papers upon papers upon papers, which is good. Your journals are good because that's what gives you an idea of what's going on. But it's just that one thing leads to another, and there are people who get excited about, oh, I found this, maybe that's going to work, so I'm going to dig deeper into that. So there's a whole lot of reading that grad school, my higher studies were a part of. Oops, sorry about that. And then thesis, of course, like I said, most of the grad programs that you will end up signing for as an engineer, chances are they're very likely going to be thesis-based programs. And having lived through it, having seen my friends do it, I think a lot of people say, you know what, I'm done, I'm bored, I'm going to take a break from my thesis, at least for the weekend, and then I'll get back to it. And the weekend becomes a week. Sometimes people tend to lose motivation, and it ends up becoming a month, and then a semester, and a year. You don't make as much progress as you thought you would, and people are constantly telling you should go back to finishing your thesis, wrap it up, just get done, leave. So I thought grad school was going to be about that. And to a certain extent it was, but finally personal life, I'm like, okay, so I have to deal with all that. And I don't have a personal life. It's like, what's going on? And again, depending on the type of life you live, you may or may not have a personal life, and we'll touch upon that as we progress through the talk. But it's just one of those things that I wasn't sure what sort of an impact were the higher studies was going to have on my personal life. What sort of an impact was grad school going to have on my life, my friends' lives, etc., etc. So I thought grad school was essentially going to be all about coursework, all about research, all about student employment, and a fine time between studying and working, because not all of us are used to working when we're studying in India. And I certainly didn't work, and I'm sure that a lot of you all we did back in the day, and now students too. So getting college, finishing your subjects, getting good grades, going back home, going to your hostel, that's pretty much all we did. But here, students work, you have to manage all your courses, etc. So I thought there was going to be about that. It was going to be about reading, thesis, and not having a personal life. And 5 years of the time that I spent as a graduate student, and 2 graduate degrees later, I found out that grad school or higher studies was exactly that. It was all of that. Coursework, research, working on campus, a whole lot of literature review, working on your thesis, and a little bit of personal life sometimes. And there were times when I thought, what am I doing? What's going on? Why am I even here? And I'm sure that a lot of my friends would agree that at a given time, all of us have been there. It's not the case that that's the only thing that you feel throughout your higher studies, but all of us question ourselves and we're like, what's going on? Why am I even here? But there's more. I don't mean to paint a picture that says, oh, grad school is tough and whatnot. It is in parts. There are some times when it's tough, but then there are things that you can take away to kind of take a better experience out of your grad school time that you spend at the universities. So to say, there's make the most of it, part of it, outside of your research or outside of your academic life during your higher studies also. So what I found out was grad school is also about I'm just going to call it law of averages, but my higher studies, my grad school, the 5 years that I spent, I've lived by 3 or 4 quotes, 3 or 4 statements, and I'm like, this is exactly what I'm going to follow because that makes the most sense to me. And like I said, all of this, whatever I'm saying right now, what I'm going to say in the next 15, 20 minutes, whatever that is, is all based on my observation and the fact that it's worked for me. So when I say a quote made sense, it made sense to me. So I'm just hoping that I share the experience and you can take away something out of it. One of the main quotes is, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And at that point, I'm like, interesting. Let me make a mental list of the people that I spend all my time with. Is it people inside the lab that I work with, or people outside on campus? Is it my student work that I spend all my time with the student workers, or do I just spend a lot of time watching movies with my roommates, or what kind of people that I spend time with, and how much time do I spend with these various groups on campus? And that gave me a very different perspective on how much time I spend, in what kind of things I spend my time, and kind of people that I spend my time with, and the exchanges that I have with these people. So this is one of the quotes that I live by, and trust me, it made a lot of sense. Now that I look back, I'm like, interesting quote. One of the other experiences or other things that grad school or the higher studies is about is the overall experience. I feel like most international students, at least the students from India that move to the US, we are all accustomed, very used to the fact that we have to get a good GPA, and GPAs are important. GPAs are probably the most important thing that will open doors for you, I guess. That'll be on that resume right up there up top. So getting good marks, scoring well on your exams is absolutely important. But I think higher studies is more about the overall experience. I think one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves is, what are we going to take away in addition to our degrees when we leave our universities? And I don't think that most of us do that often or as much as we should, especially as international students. And I say that because at the end of the day, people will find ways, people will work hard to get good grades. Here, it's the GPA scale is 4, so counter to what we were used to 10 back home. So on a 4, I'm sure that there are people who would not do anything and still be 3 and above. There are people who will work hard, 3.5. There are people who I know have been 4s throughout their master's degrees. I'm like, dude, how do you do it? Like, I don't know, I'm just being normal. So there are people who would get good grades regardless of what they're studying. But the point is, you would have gotten good grades even if you were in India at, I don't know, IIT, whatever university it is, like IIMs and whatnot. The point is that your academic degree, your academic experience of you getting grades would have happened regardless of where you were. But the fact that you're here in the US or whatever country it is, what else are you going to take away? Because you could have gotten a good degree in any place outside the US, any place, even back in India. It doesn't even have to be outside India. You could have gotten a master's in chemical engineering and an MTech, whatever that is. But then the very fact that you're outside India, what else are you going to take away? It's not like our countries don't have institutions. You're all at one. So I think this is one question that people don't really ask themselves. At least I made it a point to ask myself that every now and then, because I felt that I would do not a whole lot of justice to myself and the money that I'm spending if I'm not taking away more than just a piece of paper that says, oh, okay, this guy has a degree, what next? And one of the things that I really found out through my time during my higher studies is that grad school is also about networking. I'm going to take a sip of water, sorry. This is a quote that we've grown up with. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this before. I'm sure a lot of you will hear this quote again. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. Or if we were in person, I would ask you to shout out what follows. But since we're virtual, it's something that I realized after having moved here, that I found out that there's more to that quote. Something that we've gotten used to back in India is it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. But after having moved here, I realized that it's not only about what you know, it's also not only about who you know, it's also about who they know. So there's an extension to the quote that we've grown up with. For instance, if you and I are friends, acquaintances from whatever place it might be, and if I am trying to start a business, if I need information about a given topic, or if I need some sort of a connection at a company, and if you know a bunch of people who are powerful enough, or who are knowledgeable enough, or experienced enough to share that information with me, that's a different scenario. That's a total game changer. So I think the extension is that it's not one-on-one. It's not about me knowing things. It's not about me knowing you, but it's also about me strategically knowing people who know other people. And very recently, just about a year ago or so, I heard a different version of the extension that I heard, which goes on the lines of, it's not about what you know, it's not only about who you know, it's also about who knows you, which also made a lot of sense to me, because we right now live in a world in which people are busy in our own, we were all busy in our own lives, right? There's a whole lot going on. We all have our own professions, careers, problems to deal with, our own ways of winding down. Giving people that you don't know your time, your attention is tough. So it comes down to, in a lot of cases, it comes down to who knows you, so that they can be, this mentor of sorts, or this person that opens doors for you, doors that you didn't even know exist. I've been fortunate enough to be in situations wherein I totally didn't realize that people were noticing some things that I said or did, and they're like, "Hey, I know that you used to do that, so how about let's work on this, because I would like to do something that you're interested in, I'm interested in it, so let's do something about it." So long story short, it's not only about what you know, it's also about who you know, who they know, and who knows you. So there's other extensions to this quote, and that's something that I learned the hard way during my higher studies. And then finally, I also learned that opportunities to grow, to personally develop certain skills, to learn, are not really, I made that mistake on the slide. It's supposed to say opportunities are not attached to the clouds. They're attached to the people that you move with. And I found that very interesting, because you can tend to have all sorts of ideas, you can tend to have all sorts of talents, but if people don't see that you have that talent, if people don't know where you are when they need a certain skill that you have, chances are that you're not going to get that opportunity. A lot of the people, especially international students, I think, struggle with the fact that we don't get a lot of opportunities that come our way, because of the fact that we're international, we're in a different place, we're in a different culture with different people from all over the world. It gets overwhelming really quickly. So going out and looking for opportunities is tough. And sitting back and waiting for opportunities is also tough. So at what point do you say, you know what, I'm going to stop trying, and if something comes my way, I'll take it. If not, we'll see how things go. Or are you going to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go hunt for opportunities because, hey, I'm outside my country, I need to make most of my time here. What am I going to do? And I think one of the easiest ways is to be involved with people who are doing other things. And they may have opportunities for you that you probably didn't even realize that you had access to. So again, opportunities are not involved. I apologize for the typo, but opportunities are not attached to the clouds. They're attached to the people that you move with. And that's something that I learned also the hard way during my higher studies. So, given that I've shared that with you, let me share a quick story, an experience that I think I'll never forget. After having moved here, I always had this thing to learn Spanish. I'm like, back in St. Joseph, I used to watch a whole lot of movies, and I'm like, Spanish sounds really good. I should learn Spanish. And I started learning online, but all of us know that a lot of people finish their online courses, a lot of people don't. And I fall into the second category of people that couldn't really, stay committed enough to finish my Spanish courses online. So after I moved here, I thought, I'm here and I know that there are people who speak Spanish. So let me see if I can either talk to them or maybe just sign up for courses, sign up for subjects that teach me Spanish. One thing led to another, and I was told that I can't take the subject because that is from a different college within the university, and I can only take engineering subjects. I'm like, okay, is there no other way? They're like, oh, there you can take it, but you'll have to sign up separately outside of your degree, and you'll have to pay extra. And that was, I think, at that time about $2,000, something like that. And I didn't have that kind of money to learn a subject, to take an extra course that I didn't even have the time for. So what I did was, I found out that there was an organization on campus, a student club called Latinos in Action or Latinos in Action. They go by LEA. So I'm like, okay, I see that there are a group of students who speak Spanish in that group, in that organization. So maybe I'll just go attend their meetings. And that's exactly what I did. I was initially hoping to learn Spanish from the group, but turns out that that's not the group is for. They would speak in Spanish, they would exchange words here and there, but then that's not a group that teaches you Spanish. That's just a group of people who just want to get together, promote the culture, have events on campus pertaining to the culture, serve as an advocacy group for the Latino students, but not exactly Spanish, to teach Spanish specifically. So I'm like, okay, I'm here, bunch of new people that I don't know, a bunch of new people that I can make friends with. So let's just sit and chit chat. And through that group, through that organization, LEA, I got to make friends with this individual called Jojo. Jojo was, I think Portuguese American, not even from Portuguese, if I remember right. And Jojo and I bonded over anime because I think at that point I saw that the T-shirt that he was wearing was an anime T-shirt, if I remember right. And then one thing led to another. We got to talking, and I learned about a group called RAP, and that's not the RAP that we know. It stands for Racial Awareness Pilot Program. And they eventually dropped the pilot and just became the Racial Awareness Program, but they stuck to RAPP because RAP is just regular rap music. And I've always been curious to know, or I had been curious to know at that point, at that time, to know and be a part of rap, but then never really saw anybody Indian, anybody from India in that group. So I always stayed away from that organization. I just didn't really know where I would fit, or if even I would fit into that organization. But Jojo and I got to talking, and I got to know more about rap, and I'm like, okay, I guess I can actually learn a whole lot about the American culture, the people, the life here, the life in the US from a very different lens than what I'm used to, because all of us look at life abroad based on what we see on social media, what we see on the internet, on Facebook, on the news channels, on the TV, and in the movies. But this group, I thought, would give me a very different perspective. So I signed up, I had to apply, I got through, and I found out that they had a week-long retreat of sorts. And this retreat was off campus, and this was about a year into my higher studies, my grad school. And at that point, my research was getting to me. I needed a break. Hadn't really had a break at all for the entire year. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sign up for this week-long retreat. I say week-long, but it was 5 days. And then just zone out from everything related to my chemical engineering degree. I'll just focus on what's going on within the group, with the people, talk to them, and then once I'm back on campus, once I'm back to Cincinnati, we'll see what happens with my degree. So during those 5 days, I met a bunch of people that I wouldn't have had the chance to meet outside of that setting. I made a lot of friends that I wouldn't have had a chance to meet and make friends with. And one of the people that I vividly remember from that group, his name's Byron Hutchins. Byron and I got to talking about a lot of things. And somewhere along the line, we talked about interests outside of racial awareness, outside of UC. And this was I think in the summer of 2013. I had started in 2012, summer of 2013, and then about 6 months from then, I think, or maybe about a year after that, I ran into Byron on campus. I met him on campus, and he said, Sid, when we were talking about a bunch of things during that lab program that we were a part of, it was called Accelerating Racial Justice, ARJ. He said, when we were part of ARJ, did you tell me that you're interested in TED Talks? Was it you or was it somebody else? I'm like, oh, that's totally me. So one of the things that I wanted to do after I moved to the US to pursue my higher studies was to just sit in an audience at a TEDx event. I had always watched a bunch of them when I was in college, but I actually wanted to be a part of something live. And I said, hey, you know what? It would be great if I could just go to an event, sit back and listen to people talk. And I think I mentioned that to Byron somewhere during our conversation when we were a part of the RAP program. So 6 months or 8 months later, he comes back to me and he says, were you the one that mentioned that you were a fan of TED Talks? What's going on? Are you that person? I'm like, it's totally me. Like, I've always been wanting to sit and enjoy, sit and watch a live show. So he said, I'm actually on the board of TEDx Cincinnati, and I'm on the organizing committee, and we're looking for volunteers. Would you like to help? I'm like, yeah, sign me up. All I wanted to do was sit in the audience, but if you think I could help the organizing team out, absolutely, sign me up. So I volunteered for TEDx for about 3 years. I would go to the event, do whatever I was asked to do to the best extent possible. There were a few other volunteers, had a chance to meet them and whatnot. So I volunteered for them for 3 years. And after that point, out of the blue, I got a call from the president of TEDx Cincinnati. Her name is Jamie Edelheit. Jamie called me and said, Sid, I'm following you on social media, and I know that you're working on a bunch of fun stuff, cool stuff. And I know that you're on the Hyperloop team on campus. Would you like to do a talk? I'm like, you want me to do a talk? Is this happening? And long story short, it resulted in me doing a talk about Hyperloop. And I say that because in college and even in school, I was the kind of guy that had huge amounts of stage fright. I vividly remember in my final year in college, Paniappan sir had asked us all to take a topic, go onto go by the blackboard and explain it, teach it, just so that we could improve our skills. And I told him no, and he was like, people laughed at me like, are you serious? You of all people have stage fright. I don't believe it. You're going to do it. And I refused it. I flat out refused it. And it just didn't happen. After that, I look back and I'm like, did I blow my chance of overcoming that stage fright back in college? Or is it just good that I decided to not do it? And that had always bothered me to the extent that I just wanted to get rid of it. I couldn't tell myself that something as trivial at that point as that was slowing me down, was stopping me from doing something I liked to do. I liked to speak, I liked to talk, especially in front of people, but then stage fright had set in. How that happened is a totally different story for a different webinar, for a different workshop. But long story short, in college, I had a chance to do some speaking. I didn't take it. So after having moved here, I finally had a chance to let go of a fright, a fear that I had been holding on to for about 12 years, I think. And that felt really good. That gave me a whole lot of confidence. That gave me a whole lot of, I think, mental peace to know that I had gotten over something that I was really afraid of, and that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for people like Jamie, people like Byron who introduced me to Jamie, and then people like Jojo who introduced me to rap. Because if it weren't for the rap program, I wouldn't know Byron. If it weren't for Byron, I wouldn't know Jamie, and wouldn't have gotten to do a talk 3 years down the line and gotten over the fear that I had held on for 12 years. So the point that I'm trying to make is that getting involved on campus really helped me a whole lot in really figuring out who I am. And I think that's something that most of us need to consider, need to think when we're doing higher studies. Right? That's some of my involvement. There's a bunch more that I just didn't want to add to the slide and just add slides upon slides upon slides. But then that's the gist of it. And the kind of involvement that I had on campus as a graduate student during my higher studies, I think goes a long way in shaping who I am today, and in trying to determine what I've been able to take away from my higher studies. And I think that people need to just be involved, plain be involved, whether it's college or higher studies or just in life in general. So that was my involvement, a little bit of my involvement on campus. Some of this involvement brought me a whole lot of honor, I guess, honor and recognition. That's some of it. It felt good that there was some recognition to the hard work that I was doing. Felt good that people were taking notice of the work that I was doing. And it also kind of served as a reiteration, if you will, to the fact that I do some decent work, I do some good work, and I'm not as quote unquote useless as I thought I was, or there are so many things that I could actually do that I didn't even know I could do. I'll get to that in just a bit. So long story short, got involved a whole lot, got a lot of recognition for it. And that's a major part of higher studies that most people don't take away from. But keeping all the awards aside, I think higher studies is also about memories. And I don't mean that in a crude way. I think regardless of when we study, be in college or be it post-graduation, a lot of us make a lot of memories. And before I move on to what these are, I want to say that for the sake of this talk, let's keep aside all the memories that we make with our friends, because regardless of where we are, regardless of what university we're at, regardless of what college we're in, our friends shape up a big chunk of our memories, and we tend to have a lot of fun with our friends, and that eventually ends up shaping up how we feel about college and what we took away. So when you look back and if you ask yourself, did you have fun in college? I'm sure you'll say that you had fun. But then for the sake of this discussion, let's keep the fun that you had with your friends. And let's just look at the kind of fun that you had for yourself as an individual, right? The first picture, those of you who watch anime would recognize that. I grew up watching a whole lot of Dragon Ball Z, a whole lot of Naruto, and I had learned about the San Diego Comic-Con and cosplays and whatnot. Never had a chance to go to a proper San Diego Comic-Con, but then I was able to do a cosplay of a character from Naruto during the Halloween event that we had on campus. Had a chance to meet Howard Schultz, the previous president CEO of executive chairman, I think, of Starbucks. In the left column, you will see that I was hanging out with a bunch of other cosplayers at a TEDx event. This was a stormtrooper. There were a bunch of stormtroopers running around with their guns. There's an R2D2 going back and forth. The TEDx talk that I previously told you about was about Hyperloop. And then I had another chance to do a second one about internet memes. So if, like I said, if you don't know by now, I'm big about memes, and I get to talk about it. The image on the right, give me get some water, sorry. Those of you who watch a lot of movies would recognize that image on the right top. Had a chance to go to UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, and that's the picture from Varanam, the movie that I'm sure you must have watched or heard of. The image above on that collage, this one is from the movie, and this one is from the time that I was there. That's just something that I do when I travel. I look up some of the movies that were filmed in these locations, go take pictures, and I know that sounds cheesy, but that's just something that I personally enjoy doing. And I feel like these little things are things that we don't take away from the image below. Those of you who watched The Dark Knight Rises would recognize that that's Bane from the movie. And then the image below is from where I got the picture from. I think higher studies can be really tough at times, and we need to find these little wins, little moments of happiness that keeps us going, that keeps us on track, that keeps us motivated, or little wins that stops us from getting demotivated. I think two different things. Getting motivated is always good, but sometimes stopping yourself from getting demotivated also goes a long way. Also, to a certain extent, save you from depressive feelings and things like that. So finding fun things to do, things you enjoy. I feel like most international students don't do much of that. I feel like all international students in general, at least the ones from India, including me, tend to stick in a group of people that are either from the same city or maybe just from India, and in certain cases, people who speak the same language. I think as international students during your higher studies, you absolutely have to have the support system, that familiar face, that familiar sound of your language that keeps you going. At the end of the day, you need that support. But I feel that most international students get confined in that group, and we can't really venture out and do much for ourselves. Sometimes there are things that you have to do for yourself, for your own sanity, so that you can keep your peace of mind, keep staying motivated, and keep doing what you do. So these are things that I used to do, and a bunch of other crazy stuff that happened was being a part of Hyperloop. One of my friends on campus asked me to be a part of the Hyperloop team. Our team was one of the very first teams to be selected to do the finals at the very first time when this happened in 2015, 2016 is when the competition got started. And as you can see, I had a chance to rub shoulders with Elon Musk. His security guard was not happy. He yelled at me for it, but I'm like, hey, it is what it is. This is my moment. I'm just going to enjoy it. This was in California. Had a chance to ask Elon for a selfie in Texas when we were there for the semifinals. He told me that he's not going to do it because if he says yes to me, he's going to be there for the next few hours until 3 a.m. So he's going to say no to my selfie. And I was disheartened, but it is what it is. During that time to California, when we were there at the SpaceX facility, is you can see place that I had only heard of on campus as a graduate student, place that I had only heard of when I was in college back in St. Joseph. Say, oh, SpaceX is so cool, oh, this and that. But then to actually be there at SpaceX was a very different feeling. It felt like, okay, fine, I'm finally here, of sorts. During that trip to LA, we had a chance to visit NASA JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab. Had a chance to eat space food. That's ice cream sandwiches that astronauts have on the International Space Station. It tasted like chalk. Wouldn't recommend it. Don't ask me how I know what chalk tastes like. But hey, it was a good experience. How often can I claim that I got to have food that people on the International Space Station have, right? So stuff like that. The picture over here, as you can see, I'm a huge fan of Fast and the Furious franchise. Some of the movies were really bad, but Tokyo Drift was my favorite. And as you can see, this is Dominic Toretto's home from the movies, and that's me outside that location. So small wins like that go a long way. And possibly the most craziest thing that has ever happened to me was to see my name in a Playboy magazine. Not the way you think, but Playboy of all the magazines decided to do an article on immigration in the US, what people mean to the system, to the economy, and things like that. So I was just happy to be a part of something like that. So long story short, all of this goes a long way in shaping who you are as an individual when you're here for your higher studies. And I feel that most students don't consider the opportunities that you tend to have when you move here. I think as human beings, as people, regardless of where we are, regardless of what we do, we have a lot of potential. We just don't realize it. And when you put that potential against the opportunities that we miss or the opportunities that we don't hunt, the amount of growth that we miss out on is massive. And I'm hoping that makes sense, that you have the ability to do a whole lot of things, but you don't know how to do it. You don't know what to do with that ability. So you can't do as much as you could do, so you don't get what you deserve. So you just miss out on your growth, your potential, your learning, and all that stuff. And I feel like all of these little wins, little things that you can do could go a long way. And as international students during higher studies, please focus on things that you can do outside of your lab, your classes also. So after 5 years, what did I learn? After 5 years of my student life in the US, what did I learn? Like I said, I started off as a student working towards a master's in chemical engineering. I was under the impression that that's just the natural progression because I was a bachelor's in chemical engineering student. So I'm like, it makes perfect sense to go get a master's in chemical engineering. And while that was good, I think my motivation kind of went, I wouldn't say went away, but it's just that as I got involved, as I met more people, as I spoke to more people, I realized that there's other things that I also enjoy in addition to being an engineer. Sometimes people are thrown into engineering, don't necessarily enjoy it. So I feel that most students assume that the natural progression to get a master's is to do exactly what you did in your bachelor's. And until you finish your master's, you're not a proper engineer. A lot of people feel that way. And a lot of people made me feel that way because I spoke to them. They're like, oh, that's the absolute honest thing to do, the right thing to do. Go get a master's in chemical engineering and then you become a proper engineer. And then you figure out what you want to do in life. I found that to be very absurd. It's sad that it took me a bachelor's and a master's to figure out certain things that I wanted to do. But when you're planning your higher studies, please make sure that the degree that you're looking at to pursue is exactly what you want to do. Explore other options. There's data analytics. Everyone's talking about data. Data is what runs the world. Now, back in the day, they were like, oh, oil runs the world, and now data runs the world. And that's very true in a lot of cases. there's information systems. After having moved to the US, to Cincinnati, us engineering students would watch our MSIS friends get jobs like that. The one thing I would tell you is that explore all the options that you have as much as you can before you decide on what to pursue. I did it, and I don't necessarily think that if I go back in time, I would do things exactly the way I did. There's always engineering management that you can look at. But again, like I said, long story short, this is probably going to be a chance to switch tracks, or maybe even go dig a little deeper into what you're doing. But just because you have a chemical engineering degree as a bachelor's doesn't mean that that's exactly what you have to do in your master's degree also. The other thing that I want to highlight is, okay, you've finished your college, where do you go now? And I feel that the US has a certain glitz and glam to it even now. Of course, now it's a little different given the situation, but don't let that glitz and glam be or don't let that factor into your decision of where you want to do your higher studies. Now that I look back, there are places that I've gone to. There could have been a situation wherein I could have done something in Europe, gone to Australia, Canada, I don't know. But I do feel that a lot of people make an impulsive decision that you have to study in the US because an American degree is known well over the world, which is true. And I'm not saying that this is not the best place to study. It is, and that's exactly why international students have increased over the years. But just ask more questions. Just because your cousins went to the US, just because your seniors went to the US, doesn't mean that you have to do it in the US also. So ask yourselves a bunch of questions about long-term stability, long-term planning. Is a long-term plan a part of your decision to pursue higher studies? Or do you not really care because you can get a degree and go back to India or whatever country you're from, and then just do what you want to do back home, in which case it doesn't really matter. But as international students, I feel that most people end up signing up for the US without having a really good idea of what we're getting into, and I was one of them. So that's something that I learned. I'm like, maybe I could have made a few decisions a certain way. I also learned that there's no one way of getting it done. There's no hack to it. There's no blueprint to it. Everyone's priorities are different. My priorities are different from XYZ's, ABC's, and just because something worked for me doesn't mean that it will work for XYZ and ABC, and the other way around also. Just because something worked for them doesn't mean that it will work for me as well. So what you have to do is learn about all the experiences that you can, talk to as many people as you can, and find your own way to get things done. And like I said, make the most of your time here in the US. One thing that I vividly remember is from my college days is Venkatesan sir used to keep asking us to look at our bachelor's degree from a different perspective, from a monetary standpoint. He would say, hey, you're spending this much and you're spending these many days here. Divide that and figure out how much you're spending per day as a student. And if you're going to do that, are you getting the value for that amount of money each day? Let's say that you're spending 1,000 rupees, $1,000 in 10 days, right? So a value of each day, you're going to be spending 10 times less, $100, 100 rupees. The value that you receive from that day, is it worth the money you spend, worth that $100, worth that 100 rupees that you spend? And I feel like just getting a degree is not exactly worth the amount of money that we spend at any given location. There has to be more to it. So make sure that you ask yourselves, if you're making the most on a per day basis, per month, per year basis when you're studying, when you're here for your higher studies, ask yourselves what value do you add. And I feel like a lot of us, me including, tend to get caught up on what can we get from people or how can people help us. And we forget to really ask ourselves, how can we help people? What sort of value can we add to the others? And one of the good ways to do that is to volunteer. Just help people out. Don't expect anything in return. And I'm sure that the goodwill that you put out there in the world will come back and benefit you in the long run. Like I said, push yourselves as much as you can, as much as you want to, because staying in the comfort zone is not going to help, especially when you're here for your higher studies, because the life is a race in certain ways. In certain ways, it is survival of the fittest. And I know that a lot of people would disagree with me on that, but then the life we live in right now, the times that we live in right now are very competitive. To a certain extent, a bunch of people would even say that it's a rat race. People just want to do better than the others to get ahead in life. Depending on what situation you're in, you will have to push yourselves harder and harder to make sure that you stand out. What that factor is that makes you stand out is up to you, your individual self, to decide what you're going to do. And at the end of the day, like I said, I've been talking about the people that you surround yourself with. Keep good company. There are times when you would not necessarily pay attention to the people that you're around. They're good people. Chances are that they're extremely good people to move with. But are they going to mentally shape you the way you want to be shaped, where you want to be in life? Or are they going to slow you down? Or are they the type of people that you want to be with because they motivate you, they encourage you, they push you harder, and that helps you become a better person? What kind of people are you with? I feel that higher studies has become a mechanism to earn in a different currency, and in my case, dollars. Earning in dollars, in my opinion, is not the definition for a successful life. I feel that even now, people back home are like, oh, he's in the US or she's in the US, great, oh, good. That's, in my opinion, not exactly the case. Just because people are outside India, people are in the US, doesn't mean that everyone is successful. All of us have our own ups and downs. We're all fighting our own battles. And just because people are there and different kind of people over here doesn't mean that one is less successful, the other one is more successful. But then the point I'm trying to make is that higher studies shouldn't be a means to earn in dollars. Higher studies in the US, grad school in the US shouldn't be a means to earn in dollars. That shouldn't be the only thing that should be the outcome of your degree. I feel that life in the US, life in general, is way more than just a degree. And in my case, it's much more than a CPT and OPT or a work visa. What CPT, OPTs are, we'll save that for a separate discussion. But life in the US is more than getting a work visa. Is it important? Extremely important, yes. But there's more to it. Just because you have an H-1B, just because you earn in dollars, doesn't mean that you've made it in life, right? So when you're looking at higher studies, have a very wide exposure of what success means to you, not by the definition of the society that you're a part of, but for you. And how are you going to get there, and how are you going to make the most of whatever process you're a part of, be it college or here and at any given point in your life. So I guess the question now is that, was I able to make the most of my higher studies, of my 5 years that I spent in grad school? In a way, I guess I did, because when I started here in 2012, had somebody told me that I would be where I am right now, had somebody told me that I would have done a bunch of things that I did during the course of those 5 years, I would have laughed at them. I would have said, "Hey, there's no chance that that's going to happen." I had somebody told me that I would end up working at the university that I studied at, I would have laughed at them. Had somebody told me that I would be teaching, I would have laughed at them, because I never knew that I had all that in me to do whatever I did, to be where I am right now, to be doing what I'm doing right now. So I guess it kind of makes sense that I made most of my higher studies, or maybe I didn't. I don't know. Time will tell. That's an answer that I think I'm going to be in a continuous search for. But the good thing is I did find shoes that fit my feet. So I guess in a way I did make the most of my higher studies, because that's the only thing that I wanted to do. When I was in my third year in college, I'm like, hey, I'm just going to move to the US, get better shoes that fit my feet. Made in China, but hey, I got into the US. So I guess in a certain way I did make the most of my higher studies. But it's just one of those things that I keep looking back and I keep asking myself, I'm here, so what else am I going to be doing? How else can I improve what I take away from this experience? How else can I grow? And things like that. So I guess this is one of those questions that I'll probably not have an answer for. So did I make the most? Maybe, maybe not. But what I can say is that I did a bunch of stuff that I had no idea that I could do. I think all of us have, as international students, we've achieved a bunch of stuff that we did not have any clue of, that we had the ability to make or have those achievements. So I guess in that way, I did make the most that I could. Look back, would I change a lot of things that I did on campus? Probably not. I would change a few things that I started off doing prior to moving here. Those I would change decision-wise, but anything that I did on campus would probably not be any different. I don't mean to paint a very rosy picture that things are easy, things are charming, oh, this and that. No. I think priorities are different for different people. If you want to get a degree and get done and get moving, get working, great, good for you. But if you want more, if you want to experience different kind of things, you have to have a different approach, right? I am one of those people who grew up watching a whole lot of English movies and a whole lot of English shows, and I had a rough idea of what to expect after I moved here. And after I got here, I said, okay, I've seen this, and that on my TV and in the movies, so I'm going to do exactly that. And I had a checklist of things that I wanted to experience. And I think that kind of shaped the way I looked at things after I moved here. There were a lot of sacrifices to make. I'm not gonna, like I said, paint a rosy picture and say, hi, it's all easy, it's all peachy. No, it's not. The more you want to take out of your higher studies, the more you will have to give. And that's one of the things that I really had a tough time to, figure out initially, at least in terms of time management. There's only a certain number of hours in a day, and there's only a certain amount of things that you can do as an individual. So make the best of the time that you have. Time management is very important. Like I said, I was pretty involved on campus. So what I would do is be involved during the day, and I had my keys to the research lab, and I would do my research in the night. I would sleep under my office desk on campus, wake up, go to the gym, shower, work out if I can, and then get back to work. So I'd spend 3 to 4 nights on campus, then go back home and cook as much food as I can for one night, and then bring it all to the campus to my lab. There were times when we just had to forego sleep. There were times when or at least I got only about 8 hours of sleep in the span of 3 days. There were times when, or a big chunk of time, several weeks, that home cooked food or cooked food, forget home cooked food was a luxury. I had a box of apples and a jar of peanut butter and a whole lot of coffee, clearly Grad school got me used to coffee a whole lot. That was my food for the longest time. Back in college, when I was in St. Joseph's, coffee was not a thing. But after having moved here, I had to have so much coffee to to stay up that I just can't get rid of coffee now. To the extent that I'm like, I'm drinking way too much coffee. Let's measure how much coffee I drink. And the highest or the most amount of coffee that I've had in a day was, I think, a little above 2 liters. And that scared me because I'm like, dude, this much coffee is not healthy. So the point I'm trying to make is define what this most is for you when you decide to do your higher studies. And understand and know that the more you want to make out of your higher studies, the more you will have to give. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because good things happen when you give more, but there are times when things don't work out. But they also teach you a whole lot. So when you're looking at stuff like this, make sure that you ask yourself a bunch of questions that I wish I had asked myself a little earlier. So these are, like I said, the life lessons that I learned. But I also said, I wish I had learned all this a little earlier. I keep saying that I moved here and I did this and did that and that and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But then if you notice, these 3 things that I mentioned, I didn't have to move to the US to follow all that. I didn't have to pursue higher studies to, network. I didn't have to pursue higher studies to go look for opportunities. I did not have to finish my bachelor's and then start worrying about the kind of people that I spend time with or what I spend my time towards. These are things that, regardless of where you are in life, college, school, work life, as a working professional now, I think we could do that. So I wish I had started all this a little earlier back in college. And I think life would have been very different if I had put a little more thought, been a little more conscious about these things when I was in your shoes. I think I would have saved at least 2 or 3 years of my time in getting to where I am right now. I think you folks have the advantage of still being able to figure out what you want to do after college, while you're in college. You folks also have the advantage of, how do I put this, talking to more people before you make some life-changing decisions. So as much as I had to wait to finish college and move here to learn all this, the one thing that I want you all to take away, if there's anything to take away from this, is that I hope that you all do this now when you're in college, so that you don't do the mistakes that I did, or you don't consume as much time as I did in doing some of the things that I did, so that it not slows you down, so that the things that I took 3 years to do, you could do it in 1 year. So don't wait for your college to get done. Don't wait for your bachelor's degree to get done. Please be conscious of all of these things and ask yourselves these questions mindfully now. One of the other things that I want to highlight is the law of 33% that I came across by Tai Lopez. And it says that all of us as individuals, regardless of where we are, need to be mindful of the fact that 2/3 of the time we spend with people needs to be with people from different levels. And by that, I mean different levels of knowledge, different levels of experience, and things like that. So I think if you break it down, 1/3 of your time needs to be spent with people who are below that experience level, below the knowledge level to you, so that you can kind of sort of mentor them, share your experiences, share your mistakes, share what worked for you, what did not work for you to them, so that they can grow themselves. 1/3 of the time needs to be spent with people our age, be it friends in classes, be it friends from home, friends in your locality, your location, and in my case, friends from the same country. At the end of the day, people our age group, people who have the same knowledge and same experience as us, are going to be our circle of people. But please be mindful of how much time we spend with our own circle. And the final third is spending time with the kind of people who are 5, 10, 15 years ahead of you. Learn from them. People who've been able to, let's say, create a business, run a business for, I don't know, $5 million. They would know how to run a business of $1 million. So if you plan on having a business for $1 million, talk to the guy that made 5 million. Talk to the lady that made 10 million, 15 million, right? So if you plan on doing your higher studies, going to grad school outside India, and even in India for that matter, talk to people who are in grad school now, talk to people who finished grad school, so that you can get an idea of what went wrong, what are the mistakes that they did that you can learn from and not end up repeating those mistakes. So long story short, what I'm trying to say is that after having moved from India to Cincinnati to pursue my higher studies, I learned a bunch of things that I could have learned in college. It didn't occur to me. So the one thing that I want you to take away is that as much as all of this helped me in higher studies, I think I made the most out of my higher studies by following all this. I think you can make the most out of where you are now. So the questions for you folks is that what are you going to take away in addition to your degree from St. Joseph's when you leave? Are you making the most of your time in college? Those of you who are almost done, who are in your final years, did you make the most out of your college life? And I think answers to those questions are going to be very subjective, going to be very specific to who you are as an individual. It's not one of those situations wherein one answer applies to everyone, one answer fits for everyone. But ask yourself that question, or both these questions, in fact, as often as you can, because I think at the end of the day, in an effort to find these answers, you'll end up doing a few things that you didn't think you could do, that you didn't know you had the ability to do. And I think that's going to take you a long way in terms of building up yourself as an individual, your personal development, your confidence, and things like that, your organizational skills, communication skills. All of those are going to improve drastically just by asking yourselves those questions. So I think with that, thank you so much for listening to the presentation. I know that that's a very general, very generic presentation that I did. I didn't talk about specifics, but I just figured I'd keep it normal, keep it low key, and keep it non-technical, because I know that you've been listening to a whole lot of really good technical talks. I think that the real world has a whole lot of non-technical aspects that need to complement your technical skills. So I figured I'd keep it non-technical and share the experience that I've had. And I'm hoping that there was something to take out of this talk. So thank you so much. Shout out to Vinod sir for asking me to do this. Thanks so much. Thanks to all the faculty members that made this happen. Like I said, it's been ages since I've had a chance to even talk to the faculty members back home. It's been years, but I'm just glad that the connection has now been made, and I'm hoping to stay involved as much as I can. So thank you so much.
Yeah, can you answer a few questions from the participant side, please?
Absolutely.
The first question is, what are the steps involved in submission of a thesis?
Could you say that again, please? Steps involved in submission of a thesis, did you say?
Yeah.
I think that varies depending on what university you're at. Very specific, but the general approach that most people follow is that there is a proposal that you have to make, and then a final thesis submission. Then you do that proposal is a little chill based on your advisor. Your advisor can say, hey, you know what? You have 2 years time, or you have 3 years of time. by this time you have to finish a proposal, and then by that time you have to finish a thesis. There are advisors who say, hey, you know what? Proposal is just a formality. Finish your research as much as possible. Towards the end of your research, about 6 months before your final thesis presentation, put your proposal in, just for namesake, just so that we have it on paper, we have that signed, and we'll just call it a day. So the general procedure is pretty much simple. Do your research, submit a proposal, and then a final thesis submission. A lot of the advisors are very specific about the number of papers you publish as a part of your thesis. A number of professors are like, you know what, it's a very tough field that you're doing your research in, so it's a big deal if you do even one. And then there are people who never publish any papers, and that's fine too. That's it. I feel like in academia, a lot of emphasis is put on paper publications and submissions, which is good. But just because your research didn't work out the way you thought it would doesn't mean that it was a failure. It's just that things didn't work out. Simple as that. I don't know if that answers your question, but the general step: regular research, proposal, depending on when that happens, and then your thesis submission. It may or may not include a whole lot of paper publications.
The next question is, can you name few best universities for doing MS?
MS in what? Chemical engineering?
Yeah, MS in chemical engineering.
Okay, so I think that's a tough question to answer. Let me tell you why. A lot of people look at rankings and say, hey, you know what, top ranked universities are probably the best. And I feel that that's a very misleading way to look at things. I think ranking is just to get the initial attention. But what happens is that if I'm looking at a university ranking, the amount of funding that that university receives from the government, from the state government, from the federal government, the number of people who teach at that university who have PhDs, who don't have PhDs, the number of alumni that donate money to the universities after they graduate, the strength of your undergraduate program, how many undergraduate students are on campus, number of graduate students, a number of facilities, number of buildings. Long story short, there's a bunch of stuff that goes into finding out what the ranking is for your university. And chances are that for masters in chemical engineering, the ranking of the university has got nothing to do with what you want to do, what you want to study. So answering that question based on ranking will probably not make sense. Some of the best universities I have. University of Cincinnati is a really good place. I think a lot of the universities in the California system are really good. But I think best comes down to the specific people, the specific scores that you have, the specific lectures that you come up with, your statements of purpose. The one thing that I say is be careful about your location or the universities that you look at, because job prospects after universities come down to where the university is and the amount of industries outside the university in that area. So best comes down to your individual questions, individual situations. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to, I think I had my contact information over there. Let me get back to that. But then long story short, there are several really good universities, but then it depends on your situation.
And the next question is, MS in India or abroad, which one is preferable?
Also comes down to what you want to do after the degree. If you have the ability and if you don't mind spending that extra money to get the kind of experience, the kind of exposure that you want outside India, absolutely do it. The more different experience you have, the better it is, in my opinion. So if you have the chance to do it abroad. You can always go back to India if that's what you want. But if you feel like you want a certain career, you don't want to be far from home, you want to be living close to your parents, to your family, and at the same time, you don't want to spend over a certain amount towards your master's degree, absolutely. Like I said, it is not the case that we don't have good institutions in India. It's just that studying outside India, all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, over the years has been very glamorous and has all this sort of a situation. So people choose to prefer to study outside, study abroad. But it's not the case that we don't have good institutions in India. So it comes down to what you want, what your priorities are, what you want from life. In my case, I've been studying here. I've been in the US since 2012. The last time I visited, made a trip to India was in 2014. And it's almost been 6 years, a little over 6 years, then I've not had a chance to visit. So problems like these may arise if you study abroad. So do I bite the bullet and move because in that way I get to do the best that I can for myself and my family, or do I stay close to family and things like that? There's a lot of stuff you have to factor in when it comes to deciding where you want to study, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with studying in India.
Yeah, and the next question is, which one do you prefer, either job or higher studies after completing BTech?
Looking back, I think it would have been nice had I worked for a little bit. And I say that only for myself. There are people who know exactly what they want to do after their bachelor's, after the BTech. If you have that clarity, absolutely go do your thing right after college. But I think that working, getting a job after your bachelor's, after your BTech, also gives you a certain amount of exposure, or a certain amount of opens up a world of opportunities that you did not know existed before. Like I said, there's data analytics, there's information systems, a bunch of other stuff that I had no idea about until I moved here. And I spoke to the people over there, and I'm like, well, what did you study? And chances are that what they study in their bachelor's has got nothing to do with what they're studying now. And I'm like, how did you get to that conclusion? They're like, hey, I was working at New Sigma or CTS or Accenture, whatever that is, and it opened me up to these other opportunities that I could have. I can do an IT management course, a master's. I could do analytics program. I could do an information systems program, and I wouldn't have known any of that if it weren't for my job. So if you're not sure about what you want to do after college, or if chemical engineering just happens to you out of chance and you didn't really pick chemical engineering because you absolutely wanted to do chemical engineering, chances are that you're probably not gonna like exactly what you do right after. So take your time, just the ability to think, talk to other people, and working and getting a job. I think gives you that time. And exposure to a lot of things that you wouldn't be able to do if you switch right after your BTech. You get a job if you can, work if you can, but it's also okay if you do your master's right after your BTech.
And the next question is, are there any specific courses available for chemical engineering students for doing MS?
Specific courses, I'm trying to understand if that means certification or if that means specific programs within chemical engineering. I think the short answer is yes. Without knowing more about the question, it's tough to answer that question. But then anything and everything that you think you can get in terms of certification for your self, your resume, overall, or skills that will supplement or complement your degree itself, would really help. Specific courses, in a sense, get a certification for Python, get a certification for Aspen, get a Six Sigma certification, things like that. I think all of that will surely help add to the degree that you get. But once you start the degree and once you move through your research process, there are things that you will realize and you're like, oh, you know what, I don't know about that. Let me go back and do that.
And the next question is, have you gone through any career counseling in US?
I have not. And I think it would have helped in a certain way, just to explain what I want to do in life, or what I hope I want to do in life, and what people, or how people see it. A lot of times, when, as an individual, you tend to think about yourself. What your thought process is the only thought. talking to people, especially career counselors, goes a long way because they've been there, they've done that. They know the industry, they know the job opportunities more than anything. And the good thing is that career counselors usually have a lot of connections, a lot of contacts. So I wish I had done that. But I think a lot of us get caught up in the process of, oh, I think this is going to work. That's the only thing to do. So go ahead. If you can, do it during your higher studies, or even if in college you want any sort of career, talk to people who've been there and done that, especially people in the career field who have connections, who have seen a lot of people like us in various stages of life. So absolutely, if you can, do you want to pay and get help? I think a lot of people have the experience to give you input, but to get the help or not is up to you.
And the last question is, can you please explain the role of projects in job interviews?
Good question. I think with my perspective from the experience that I've had, what's on paper is only a part of interview. What's on paper only gets you that interview. What happens after you get inside that door, after you get inside that room, is about how you sell yourself, how you carry yourself, things that you talk about, your talking points on the resume. And projects on resume, regardless of what sort of projects they have, at the end of the day, end up becoming talking points that you can explain and say, hey, this is what I dealt with, and this is what the outcome was. And therefore, I can handle a situation like this if it arises at this workplace, at this position that or for this position that I'm interviewing for. And I'll give you a couple examples. On my resume, I had my research experience, my research projects that I had worked on, which was specifically chemical engineering. I had some experience mentioned based on my involvement with the Hyperloop team. I was the business lead, so I did everything non-technical, from marketing to fundraising to this and that. And then I had some points listed based on my my role with the Indian Students Association on campus as the president about event management. I think all these three projects, quote unquote, and projects don't have to be technical. Let's get that out of the way. Projects could be anything, but all these three different type of projects gave me three different stories to talk about. In event management, how do you handle more people that show up on your event when you have food only for a certain number of people? It happened with me. We had food for, let's say, 200 people, but what are you going to do if 600 people show up? They're going to point fingers at you and say, hey, your event failed because you did not have good food. So how do you handle a situation like that? And that translates to you trying to convey that you are good at handling uncertainty. My role as the business lead for Hyperloop, UC, that I was a part of on campus, I can talk about handling a bunch of things and being a student and doing my research and doing the MBA at the same time. How do I manage that? So I can make a story out of that and talk about time management skills and a bunch of other skills that I know will help for sure for that position. And technical projects, at the end of the day, obviously the technical projects, you can explain all of that in a very technical way, which obviously directly relates to the position that you're interviewing for. So projects absolutely go a long way on the resume, just that it doesn't have to be specifically a technical project that you have to talk about. At the end of the day, in an interview, how you carry yourself, how you answer, how you communicate, what kind of stories do you have to tell, and what are the outcomes of that story that relate to that position that you're interviewing for, go a long way. So projects on paper, absolutely, yes.
On behalf of the participants, I would like to thank you for answering all the questions patiently.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your valuable time, Mr. Sid. I want to conclude this session with vote of thanks. I would like to express our sincere thanks to our guest, Mr. Sid Tatham, for sharing his valuable ideas in this webinar. I would also like to thank our beloved HODs for their moral support and guidance. I'm very happy to express my vote of thanks to all of our staff members and participants who have made this webinar a great success. Thank you. Thank you all.
One last thing before people leave, if there's anything that I could help with at any point, please let me know. I'm not sure if you had a chance to my contact details down, but if not, please reach out to Vinod sir and he can pass that over to you. Look me up if you have any questions at any point with respect to higher studies. Please let me know. I'm happy to help with whatever I can. Once again, thanks to Vinod sir for reaching out to me. Thanks to all the and the staff members that are on this call from the chemical department. It was really nice to be on the call. Hope to be in touch and hope to be more involved with the department moving forward. So thank you all. Have a good evening. Stay safe. Corona is weird. The situation is bad. So stay safe. Hope you're all well, taking care of yourself. Have a good weekend.